Hi. So, welcome to Talk Connected. Welcome to another episode where we are here to inspire, educate, inform, and just really talk about real life situations, real life, challenges or stories that people may have. A place just to come together and connect and talk about mental health and emotional well being. So, I am Virginia Murray. I'm a licensed professional counselor. So let's jump into it. So, our last episode, we talked about the notion of I feel stuck. What does that mean, right? We talked about and we navigated the starting point, how to figure out where your starting point is if you're choosing to go on a journey of emotional well being or healing or whatever it is in your life where you want to create change. Because that's one of the number one things that I've heard people say. I feel stuck. I don't know where to start. How do I get started? That episode really kind of hit the surface of how to get started and answering all those questions and how to navigate that space. So if you haven't checked out that episode, I would check out that episode if that's something that truly stands out for you. So this episode, I want to kind of broach the subject and discuss the question of, are you a cycle breaker? Right? Before we do that, I would like you to take a moment to check in on yourself. If you need to pause this podcast, if you need to take a moment just to reflect, what is a check in? Oftentimes, we talk about a check in being a brief moment that you take, and you just say, how am I feeling today? And once you identify how you feel, you want to see if you can give yourself something in the moment or today that's going to help you continue to be in a healthy space. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, what is it that I can give myself in this moment? Can I ground myself? Can I, be mindful and come back to the present moment for a second? Do I need to just disconnect from all the stresses that are overwhelming me and take a couple of breaths? And then you can also say, okay, if I can't give myself anything in the moment, is there something that I can add to my schedule today that's going to feel decompressing for me? Because when we talk about giving yourself something, it's ultimately taking care of yourself intentionally. And throughout the day, we want you to stay into a healthy place. So instead of being up here with stress, maybe there's something I can give myself to bring my stress levels down here. Self-care should not feel like a chore. It should feel like decompression. Okay. So, what is it that you feel like you could give yourself today that's going to assist or help with decompression? That's going to assist or help with if you do feel exhausted, if you do feel overwhelmed, how can I make myself feel better and put myself in a better space? Right. So if you need to pause this podcast, if you need to check in on yourself, please take the time or the moment to do so. Outside of that, we're going to jump into, are you a cycle breaker? Right. And I want to start off with a poem by Mariam Williamson, Our Deepest Fear. It is one of my favorite poems that I have carried on throughout the years. Ever since I was younger, I really connected with this poem. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to highlight two things that we're going to continue to dig into within this episode. So the first paragraph and the last paragraph really stand out for the topic of, are you a cycle breaker? I encourage you to read the entire poem, Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson, because it is a beautiful poem that I feel many can connect with. So the first paragraph says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And the last paragraph says, and as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. One of the things that I really love about this poem is that in the beginning, it points out what our deepest fear may be, right? And when she says our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, that means so much for many different people, right? Which is why I love this poem, because our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. What inadequate is to you or me may be different for that person, that person, that person, or that person. So even the first line, it speaks to, just how we can be different and how it can connect into everyone as individuals. That second line, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Just like our inadequacies can be different, so can what we think our power is in life. Because everyone has different gifts, everyone has different purposes, in life. Everyone has a part to play. So, how you show up in your power in life may be different than anyone else's. That's why this poem connects to so many different people, because it connects to you, or it can connect to you as a unique individual, to how you define yourself or your life and what it is that you are set out to accomplish. That last paragraph, as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, see, because there will be a liberation from your fear if you work on it, our presence automatically liberates others. What does that mean? What that means to me, I'll state that, is as we choose to step out of our inadequacies, as we choose to step into the power of who we are and out of fear, as we continue to step into the light of who we are and let our own light shine, other people are noticing. And when other people are noticing, whether it just be from observation or we've had a conversation with them or we've even said, one thing to someone, they're noticing and they see who you are, right? And it can inspire them to also step out of a negative cycle or pattern that they have been stuck in, or to also create change in their lives and do something. We have almost all of us, have been inspired by something or someone that we have seen at some point in our lives. And that's what this speaks to: getting permission and giving ourselves permission from the inspiration that we see in other things, people, or environments around us. When we walk in our light, it can shine so bright that other people can say, I want a light like that. I want my light to shine that bright, right? Because we may be in a place of fear and inadequacy and not realize our self-worth, our value, or who we really are. And that speaks to being a cycle breaker. So a cycle breaker is someone who creates change, someone that breaks the cycle of negative influences by generational trauma, exposure to negative repetitive environments or patterns, or the influence of entrapment of normalized behaviors. There are many different aspects of generational trauma, right? There are social and cultural generational traumas. There are biological generational traumas. And I encourage you to do independent research or seek a professional, if you want to talk about those types of generational traumas. In this episode of Are You a Cycle Breaker? We're going to speak about the emotional traumas within households and generations. So it could be, I'm just going to give an example. It could be my uncle lived at home with his parents until he was 50, and my uncle's dad did the same, and his dad's dad did the same, and his dad did. So something that is carried out through the generation. And no, that's not negative to live at home, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But if you see a pattern of certain behaviors, or if you see things that are limiting other people, outside of normal circumstances, right? There is nothing wrong with living at home with your parents or whomever, depending on your circumstances. There is nothing wrong with having a tough time. There is nothing wrong with whether it be your choice, right? But in this episode, we are talking about things that have continued on through generations and lineages that have limited. So let's just say if uncle or dad had the option and the resources to get out of a space that they no longer wanted to be in, but they stayed there because they did not recognize their worth or their capabilities, or they did not recognize, how do I start? Or where do I start? Because of sometimes the feeling of those inadequacies and the feelings of fear that we have from taking the next step. So these are things that limit us, things that speak to our inadequacies, and things that speak to us not walking into the power of who we have the capability to be, right? Because we stay in that comfort zone. We stay in that comfort zone. So what are, negative repetitive environments on a deeper level, or the influence of entrapment of normalized behaviors? We'll also break it down, right? There is trauma sometimes in households. So I will talk about the trauma of impulsive emotional behavior in households, right? These are people who have grown up in households where mom, dad, caregiver, whoever their caretaker was in the household, did not know how to have a healthy space of communication. Let's just say when they got frustrated, it erupted as anger and yelling and throwing things, or, hitting someone. And that was the pattern over and over and over and over again. And what can coincide with that, right? Coincide with that is avoidance. So let's just say if there were these emotional dysregulations and outbursts, of anger and frustration every time conflict came up, later on that day, dinner might be done and conversation goes on as normal. We never talked about it. We never, worked on it. We never said, how can we change this behavior and find a resolution? We never said, let's heal from this. It just continued because that's what they may have learned in their household, and they may have learned in their household, and it just continued. These entrapment of negative normalized behaviors that are not normal, but have become normalized, right? When something becomes normalized, it just becomes just a part of a pattern or that cycle that we're talking about. And it's just out of habit because it's happened for so long, right? So you have emotional dysregulation in the household and how you handle conflict, and there's no resolution, and things just go on normally. Everybody goes to sleep, everybody wakes up and just having normal conversation. What are you doing today? How's your day? And there was no resolution to the eruption of the conflict that just keeps happening until it happens again. And then it happens again. I also gave an example of this in a different way, where if you have an argument with someone and you're just like, all right, just forget it. Let's just set that down. Like, we're not getting anywhere with this. And then 6 months later, another argument happens. And that thing from 6 months ago comes up in the new argument, and it has nothing to do with it, right? That's a lack of conflict resolution and things that can be carried over and just create an unhealthy cycle because there is no resolution to it. So in the household, if you experience dysregulation, emotional impulsivity, frustration, anger, it is a form of trauma, right? That you experience because from whoever's emotional dysregulation you grew up in the environment with over and over again, and there was a pattern of it, guess who takes on that normalized behavior as a child growing up into adulthood? The children in the household. And then all of a sudden they grow up and they have their household. And guess what happens in that household? The same normalized pattern of no conflict resolution, but emotional dysregulation and dysfunction. And then it's passed on to their children. Have you ever looked at a family or one person? Have you ever looked at one person and said, I met your family. I see where you get it from. I met your family. I see where that comes from. And that person may have no idea what you're talking about. They're looking at you like, this is just how it's always been. This is how, it is in my family. This is just us. This is just us. But it's not healthy for that to be just us or that to be just you. Just because we learned something, just because we grew up in an environment of something, that doesn't mean that we cannot create change and that we cannot heal, that we cannot turn things around, that we dare to make a difference, that we dare to create change, that we say, this stops right here with me. And when I say this stops right here with me, I no longer want to do this behavior. I'm going to heal and find resolution in my life and have changed behavior. But also, if you so desire to have children, I'm not going to pass this down to my children. And if you already have children, it is not too late to be that cycle breaker and be an example and teach and create something new and different dynamics, right? Because if you have grown up in a household with unhealthy behaviors and it's something that was learned, it's going to affect everything in your life, well, not everything, but relationships. It will affect relationships in your life. So whether that be your friendships, if you never learned conflict resolution, then your friendships are going to be affected because in every type of relationship dynamic, conflict can arise. It can. Majority of the time, if you have a relationship with someone at one point or time or another, conflict will arise. And it could be small, right? It could be small, it could not be anything serious, but it's the way that you have learned how to handle conflict that will impact that relationship. So if you've learned to handle conflict in a healthy way, maybe you know how to navigate conflict with people to where it's not going to disrupt the relationship, right? But if you have not learned how to handle conflict and you are avoidant or argumentative or you're throwing things out of anger because that's what you've learned and that's what you've seen in your environment, that will disrupt friendships or intimate relationships, partnerships, business relationships, however you have learned how to handle conflict and what you've adopted in your life. If that is not changed, if it is unhealthy, if that has not changed, it will influence your relationships in different ways. You know, thank goodness for cycle breakers, though. Thank goodness for cycle breakers. Cycle breakers are the people who want to heal, want to change, right? Well, how do I become a cycle breaker? Number one, you have to recognize your worth. You have to know who you are, right? Have a sense of self, of who you are, to be able to allow your light to shine and for you to take steps and for you to break that cycle. It starts with a sense of self. It starts with understanding. We oftentimes talk about understanding because if you can identify what the change is that has to happen and what specifically needs to change about what has been identified, when you have that understanding, it's more of a permanent change that you can create rather than just jumping into it and trying to change and go with the ebbs and flows of things and just saying, well, that got me a little bit, in the process, but now here's that question again. I'm stuck, right? But if we can create, the more understanding we create in a situation, the more we understand something and what needs to be done and how to be a cycle breaker and why it's important to be a cycle breaker to negative learned generational traumas or unhealthy experiences in your life, then the more we understand it, the more we can apply and execute it effectively. Readiness. You also have to have some sort of readiness to want to jump in there and want to have that effective change, right? And readiness means just preparing yourself. It is that, how do I understand this? How do I build up more of a sense of self in myself, right? And then readiness is also, it could be a feeling. It could be a feeling. Have you ever experienced something, whether it be with life or a challenge or even someone else, and all of a sudden you just had this feeling of no more. Mm-mm. Just no more. I can't let this affect me anymore. I can't let them affect me anymore. I can't keep going down this road anymore because this does not feel good for me. And then all of a sudden, it's like I call them light bulb moments. It's this light bulb moment that you have, and you just feel a readiness to change. Now, who helps with readiness, right? It is wonderful to have friends around, family, mentors, whoever's in your life that has the capacity to discuss these things. It's wonderful to have that. But also, it's wonderful to reach out to a counselor, a therapist, and just get support because this is a complex journey. Being a cycle breaker is complex. Let's just say like generation, we're talking like it can, go back. I'll exaggerate the number, but unhealthy patterns can go back hundreds of years, right? Because if you have lived a certain amount of years, your mother or father or caregivers have lived a certain amount of years, that person has lived 80 or 90 years on earth. It's just hundreds of years. These unhealthy patterns just go from household to household, from household to household, because that's how my parents did it, that's how they did it, and that's how they did it. So it can go on for hundreds of years. And when you decide to break a cycle that has happened for years, it's not going to be the easiest road in life to travel. And that is why it is important to have a readiness. It is important to understand it. It is important to have a sense of self for who you are. And it is so important to have support. How many of us know that on this thing called life, it's hard to do it by yourself? I don't know if you've ever navigated life or tried to navigate life by yourself, but it is difficult. It's difficult. Sometimes we need support, you know? Sometimes we want support, but sometimes we truly need support. And when I say support, I don't mean here, like, this is what I'm going through, help me carry this, right? Because we never want to pick up our emotional, mental burdens and give it to someone else, even if they want to help carry it, because we have to navigate that, right? We have to take the steps. So we don't never want to pick it up and just hand it to someone else and be like, whoo, that's so much lighter off of me. Like, thank you. Help me like carry this thing to wherever I'm carrying it to. Right. But what we can say is, I need support. You would be a good support person for me. Do you have the capacity to help me? I'm carrying this thing on my journey of life, and I'm trying to be a cycle breaker, and I'm trying to change things to create new and healthy things in my life. Is there any way that I can get an overflow of support from you? An overflow of support. That's what our support people in our lives are. They help us make the journey easier. They don't necessarily carry the weight for us because it is the work that we have to do to keep chopping down that weight, right? Imagine if there was a boulder in your hand, right? A sizable rock or boulder that you could carry, but it was sizable and it was heavy. Now, every step that you take, you have to chip away something, right? Because you're just chipping it away and it becomes lighter and lighter with every step that you take. This heaviness, right, is the thing that you want to change. It's the thing that you're trying to get rid of because it has not been healthy throughout generations or for you or how you grew up or your lifetime. And it is mixed with a healing that I have to accomplish. So you're on this journey and you're carrying this boulder. And every step that you take, you can chip a piece out of it because every step is a successful step towards breaking that cycle. What support people do in our lives is they also have a tool in their hand. And when they're stepping in unison with us and they're in alignment with supporting our journey to be a cycle breaker or break free from the unhealthy things that has been in our lineage or even in our lives, Every step that we take and every chip that we take away from that boulder, guess what our support people do too? They chip something away as well. And when I say that, right, there's some things that you can see because you're on the inside looking out at the change that you want to create. But our support people and people around us are on the outside looking in, right? So it's the perspective that they have. So there are certain things that you can see that you're just like, okay, I took care of that. I chipped that off. But then have you ever had someone look at you and say, well, did you also pay attention to that thing? Did you notice when you chipped that thing off, you also connected into that and took care of that as well? But you can't see it because of your perspective. And sometimes our support people around us can point things out to us that we can't see because they're in a different position. They have a different perspective. That's the beauty of someone that can support us. I tell people, you know, imagine when we talk about you're on the inside of your life looking out, imagine that you are inside of your house, right? And you're looking out a window. When you look outside of that window, you can only see what is in front of that window and around. You can't see the other side of the house or out another window in the back or the side. All you can see is what's inside of your house, what you're dealing with inside of your house, and whatever is outside that window in front of you. Our support people are looking from the outside in, right? So if they are standing outside of your house, they can see way more perimeter than what you can see. You can't see the things that they can see. That's why they can point things out to us that we may have missed or that we weren't paying attention to or that needed our attention. They have a different perspective and they're looking in, right? So if they're looking inside of a window looking inside of your house, they can't see the whole house like you can see because you're inside. They can only see just through that one little window, that one little space. So their advantage and a support system's advantage is they can see way more perimeter from the outside looking in. Your advantage is you can see from the inside looking out. So you have two different perspectives working in alignment and collaboration to get you to your destination so you can eventually put that boulder, that rock down, whatever you're carrying that's heavy. So it's beautiful to have support around you as you navigate that journey, right? So, how do I become a cycle breaker? You have to first understand the unhealthy cycles and patterns that have happened or occurred in your life or in your generation. And you say, well, they did it and they did it and they did it. And that's how I was raised too. It's a readiness to say, that's how I was raised. That's the environment that I grew up in. That's the environment that I was in. But I don't have to live like that anymore. I don't have to create that same environment for whoever else comes up underneath of me. I can create a different path. I can do something, healthier, right? And then just get your support people in line to help you really navigate that path. So, today we talked about how to be a cycle breaker, right? And we talked about, what it is to be a cycle breaker and the emotional impacts, of the trauma in different households. And we gave one example, right? We gave one example. And there will be more, topics speaking on trauma, speaking on how things affect us, speaking on readiness of change. So stay tuned for more episodes coming up where we really keep diving into these real life situations and real life connections. So, again, my name is Virginia Murray. I am a licensed professional counselor. Don't forget to check in on yourself. And I just hope that you have the most wonderful, beautiful day today. All right. Bye bye.